Today's episode is from the very end of the Mahabharata, when the Pandavas are ready to retire and make their way to heaven. There's mountain climbing involved, an unexpected companion, and many surprises in the afterlife. Namaskar and welcome to Stories from India. This is a podcast that will take you on a journey through the rich mythology, folklore, and history of the Indian subcontinent. I am Narada Muni, the celestial storyteller and the original Time Lord. With my ability to travel through space and time, I can bring you fascinating stories from the past, the present, and the future. From the epic tales of the Mahabharata and Ramayana to the folk tales of the Panchatantra, to stories of Akbar Birbal and Tenali Raman, I have a story for every occasion. The purpose of the stories is neither to pass judgment nor to indoctrinate. My goal is only to share these stories with people who may not have heard them before, and to make them more entertaining for those who have. In this episode, we are back to the Mahabharata. But before we jump into today's story, I just want to repeat the recent announcement in case you haven't heard the last two episodes. In just one more week, we will have completed 5 years of this podcast. And at that point, this podcast is going to go on a hiatus. I will not be releasing any more new episodes. From the bottom of my heart, thank you to each and every one of you. Whether you've been a long-time listener or whether you've only just started tuning in, your support, feedback, and engagement mean the world to me, and I'm deeply grateful and humbled by all your love and encouragement. While I'm away doing my regular Narad duties, visiting gods and goddesses, playing concerts in Swarg and so on, feel free to catch up on any of the 300 plus episodes in this catalog and stay connected with me on social media. You just might hear from me soon about a new project that I'm starting on. And now, let's jump back into the Mahabharata. This story is at the very end of the Mahabharata, after the main storyline has passed. As such, we don't need to go into all the details of the story so far. Just the very gist of it, which I'll provide right now. There were two sets of cousins, the Kauravas and the Pandavas, and the entire epic revolves around a dispute about who got to be the next emperor of Hastinapur. There were 5 Pandav brothers and over 100 Kauravas. There was a massive war between the two sides, and those 100 Kauravas were supported by the foremost warriors of the era. Their grandpa Bhishma, Dronacharya, Kripacharya, and Karna, a superb archer, who was a Pandav though he himself didn't know it. The only major ally on the Pandav side was Krishna, and Krishna was enough to help them win this war. Krishna was special because he was an avatar of Vishnu. If you haven't heard of Vishnu before, he is one of the Holy Trinity of Indian mythology. He is the preserver of the universe, along with Brahma, the creator, and Shiva, the destroyer. I'm never tired of saying this, but I'm Vishnu's number one fan and president for life of his fan club. And Brahma is my dad. And I visit Shiva regularly at his home in Mount Kailash. So you can rest assured that this show is about as authentic as it gets. Anyway, one final thing to know about the Mahabharata before we begin the story. There are no heroes or villains in this epic. There are people who sometimes act in morally objectionable ways, and at other times they don't. Basically, the characters in the Mahabharata are just regular people. Back to the Pandavas. After killing 100 cousins, their own secret brother, their grandfather, their guru, and hundreds of thousands of ordinary soldiers, the Pandav brothers were finally at peace. Yudhishthir was crowned emperor of Hastinapur and began to govern the whole empire. Though with so many casualties of the war, you might wonder if there was anyone left to govern at all. Things had not been easy for the Pandavas. Their own children were killed as well. Arjun's son, Abhimanyu, and Bhim's son, Ghatotkacha, had fought valiantly but perished in this war. Their 5 sons, the Upa-Pandavas, had perished as well, in a last gasp cowardly attack by Ashwathama in the dead of the night. And Ashwathama had also killed the Pandavas' only heir, Arjun's grandson, the baby Parikshit. Luckily for them, though, Krishna managed to miraculously bring Parikshit back to life. Gandhari, Dhritarashtra, parents of the Kauravas, and Kunti, the Pandavas' mother, had moved out of the comforts of palace life and embraced the simple life in the countryside, until they passed away in a forest fire. Gandhari, who had to witness the destruction of almost every single one of her children, had cursed Krishna that his entire clan would perish before his eyes. She could have directed her curse towards those who actually did the killing, the Pandavas, but instead she chose the person who could have prevented all this. Her curse came true. Krishna's entire clan fought amongst each other, and that meant the end of that clan. Lord Krishna himself passed away. Kripacharya, who had helped in the last gasp killing of the Pandav children and their armies at the end of the war, had been serving Yudhishthir as an advisor until he too retired into the forest. He is a Chiranjeevi, so he's still around, and rumor has it that he's in line to be one of the Saptarishi during the next cycle. Now, 36 years had passed since the Great War. After leading the empire through a quiet period, some reasonable expansion and general prosperity, the Pandavas were ready to retire. Parikshit was the new emperor, and he had taken on the heavy responsibilities of the crown, the mounting national debt and the reparations to the families that perished in the Great War. I'm just kidding, there were no reparations. And now the Pandav brothers and Draupadi felt that their time had come. It was time to retire from public life. They decided they would get to the gates of heaven or Swarg. Sahadev tried to suggest a holiday at the beach first. He had heard of this place, Goa, with its magnificent beaches which might make for a relaxing stay. But that idea was quickly shot down by Yudhishthir. "We have done everything that we wanted to in this mortal life," Yudhishthir said. "We haven't been to Goa," grumbled Sahadev, but only in his own head. Yudhishthir explained that Swarg was a logical place to go, because they had an inn. Arjun's dad, Indra, was the king of Swarg. Arjun had even visited Swarg before, so it was reasonable to expect that they would be welcomed in. The only question was logistics. The last time Arjun had visited, he had a personal escort. His own dad had come down in a chariot to get him. The Pandavas had a lot of remarkable abilities and remarkable gifts, but they didn't have a flying chariot. Their R&D division had been working on it for a while, but with little success. So the only way was to go up the Himalayas and to reach Swarg that way. Apparently, the top of Mount Meru had an escalator that led straight to Swarg. No one knew if that was true, but everyone thought that it was worth a try. Sahadev too agreed, though in his mind it made even more sense to go someplace warm like Goa before going through extreme cold. So the Pandavas and Draupadi began their journey. They had a chariot ride to the base of the mountains. They camped there for a couple of days to get acclimatized to the altitude. Altitude sickness wasn't something to be messed with. It could kill you. They didn't want altitude sickness to interfere with their plans to die in the way that they chose. While camping there, at the base of Mount Meru, a stray dog came to join them. It was probably attracted by the scent of their cooking, the likes of which he had never smelled before. That was not surprising. Most people who came here to the gateway to Swarg were not the rich types who could afford a private chef with his own massive cooking tent and who was whipping up all kinds of rich food. The Pandavas, and especially Draupadi, took a liking to the dog. He was very friendly. The third day, the six of them began their ascent. They had no specialized climbing equipment or ropes, just the layers that they were wearing and some basic footwear. Interestingly, the dog joined them. Nakul guessed that it was because their chef had packed up his tent and gone home while the dog was still sleeping. Now, this dog must have attached itself to their group, probably in the hope that the chef would come back to them at some point. The Pandavas and Draupadi had no food to share, but the dog didn't seem to mind. It kept them company and entertained them with its playful behavior. They kept climbing. The biting cold winds would have frozen ordinary humans like a popsicle. But the Pandavas were battle-hardened, literally. They kept going. Remarkably, the dog didn't run away to safety. He stayed with them. Yudhishthir had a sudden thought. Had they lost their way? He couldn't see anything ahead or above him. Maybe the snow-covered mountain continued, or maybe it was just an illusion. Was it possible they had taken a wrong turn and were now on a different mountain altogether? It was when he had this chilling thought that Draupadi fell. She didn't just fall, she passed away on the spot. She was the first amongst us to fall because she was impure, Yudhishthir reasoned. Arjun took offense at that. So Yudhishthir tried to mollify him by saying that her only flaw was that she loved Arjun more than the other Pandavas. Arjun would have vigorously defended that too. Had Yudhishthir forgotten the circumstances of the Swayamvar? But there was a bigger, more practical problem right now. What to do with her body? They were fighting and squabbling over whether they should go back down and give her a proper cremation, or whether to carry her body and continue going up. This went on until Bhim intervened. "We should leave her here," he said. The rest of them looked at him with shock, except the dog. The dog was perfectly content sitting next to Sahadev as the youngest Pandav stroked his head. Bhim didn't provide an explanation, but he pointed them to a signpost. Oddly enough, no one had noticed it before. The sign said, "Attention travelers to Swarg. Should anyone in your group pass away, regretted by all, you may avail of the free cremation service courtesy of the Friends of Mount Meru Charitable Trust. We have booths both on earth and in Swarg where you can view paintings of the ceremony of your loved ones. We sweep this path for remains every Monday, Wednesday and Friday, 9:30 a.m. and 3:30 p.m. Licensed and registered, scan this QR code to donate now. All donations are tax deductible." They didn't know what a QR code was, but that sign settled it for them. With the next collection happening in just a few hours, they could indeed leave Draupadi here. Besides, Arjun reasoned, she'd just taken the shortcut. We'll meet her when we get to Swarg. They carried on, the 5 brothers and the dog. A few hours later, Nakul fell. Yudhishthir again had an explanation. Nakul had been vain, proud of his looks, which made Sahadev think he would be next in line, because he was proud of his looks too. His meaning Sahadev's looks, not Nakul's. Though on second thoughts, the two were identical twins, so you could say that Sahadev was proud of Nakul's looks. But again, they left his body to the Friends of Meru Charitable Trust volunteers to find, and carried on. Sahadev was indeed next. Again, Yudhishthir provided his explanation and carried on. Arjun challenged Yudhishthir's idea that those with the biggest flaws were falling first. To him, it seemed to be the other way around. Was it a flaw to love someone too much? How could that be the worst sin across all the wrongs the 6 of them had done? Some of the biggest problems were actually caused by Yudhishthir, like his addiction for gambling, for example. Bhim had to agree with Arjun that it wasn't actually the order of flaws. But he had an alternative explanation. It was their age. They were dying in order from youngest to oldest. His conviction only grew stronger when Arjun fell next. Yudhishthir explained to Bhim that Arjun was too proud of his archery skills, and that was his flaw. Bhim dismissed that theory. "He was no more proud of my archery skills than I am of my strength, and I can prove it." He never got to prove it, because Bhim fell next. There was one thing that didn't fit Bhim's age theory. The dog was clearly younger than all of them, knowing the lifespan of dogs. But it seemed to be doing just fine. And now, Yudhishthir and the dog continued together in silence. They reached the top finally and found the escalator that took them right up to the gates of Swarg. Yudhishthir was surprised that Indra himself appeared at the gates to welcome him in. "Yudhishthir, you finally made it. Come on in, my boy. We've got a party lined up for you. There are games, Narad's doing a concert, and the Gandharvas and the Apsaras have been rehearsing all day to put on a special performance just for you." It was true. I had prepared a special set just for Yudhishthir's arrival. But then again, I'm often doing concerts in Swarg. It's just a regular thing for me. Yudhishthir hesitated at the gates of Swarg as Indra tried to usher him in. He looked at the dog. It stood quietly at the threshold. Yudhishthir asked Indra if the dog could come in too. "No, but don't worry, we've got other dogs in here," Indra said. But Yudhishthir was firm. He wanted this specific dog to come in as well. "Look, Yudhishthir, I'll be straight with you. This dog is going to hell, the underworld. But don't worry, it's not that bad. He'll suffer for only around 1,000 years, and then we'll have him brought up here. You won't even know how time flies up here when you're having fun. Yudhishthir made up his mind. If this dog isn't allowed in, I won't come in either. He was loyal to us throughout our journey, even when we had nothing to offer it in return. I can't repay its kindness by abandoning him now. Indra said that the only way to not abandon the dog was for Yudhishthir to go to hell as well. And Yudhishthir was okay with that. That's when the dog transformed. Turns out he was Yam, the god of death in disguise. Yudhishthir wondered but did not ask if that was the reason the others had died in the order that they did. Now that he thought back on it, Draupadi had played with the dog the most, and so had the most exposure to the god of death. Or was Yam just playing favorites because he was Yudhishthir's dad? Indra was getting impatient. Well, now are you satisfied to come in? But Yudhishthir wanted to know if his brothers and Draupadi were in there. Turns out, they weren't. Again, Yudhishthir insisted on going to hell. Yam was happy to take him there. Yam did, and Yudhishthir saw his brothers and Draupadi in agony, suffering in the underworld. Sahadev was the only one who said it wasn't all that bad. After the biting cold climb up the mountain, this was a welcome change. The brothers and Draupadi also said that their sentence was almost up. Yudhishthir could go on ahead to Swarg and save a few good seats for them at the rock concert that Narada was going to do. They had been dying for the pleasant sound of my veena. Okay, I made that last part up. But regardless, Yudhishthir was satisfied to go back up to Swarg. And after a while, the Pandavas and Draupadi did join him up there. One day, when strolling around in the princely precinct in Swarg, the six of them were shocked when they came face to face with the last people that they expected. Duryodhan, Dushasan, all of their brothers, and Karna too. All the warriors that they had slain on the battlefield were up here. The Pandavas struggled to grasp the situation, but the explanation was actually simple. Any warrior slain on the battlefield got an automatic ticket to heaven. All their other crimes meant nothing. Over time, and in the mellow environment of Swarg, with no direct competition for a throne or a crown, the Pandavas and the Kauravas got along. They did not become BFFs, but they did learn to live and let live. You could say that they had no choice, since it was impossible to die in the afterlife. But hey, you know what I mean. Though I have to say, there was one incident that night we played bingo, where there was a heated exchange between Bhim and Duryodhan about who had called out bingo first. But that was quickly water under the bridge when it was revealed that the prize was a free weekend stay at a diet farm. Bhim and Duryodhan each insisted that the other person had won. And if I hadn't been there in person to witness it, I would never have believed that it happened. That's it for this time. Previous Mahabharata episodes are linked in the show notes and on the site sfipodcast.com. Check them out. The next episode might be the last one. The very first episode on this show was about Vishnu and about me. We'll come back full circle next week, because that story is an eyewitness account from myself, and Vishnu features in it. To be more accurate, it's Vishnu's avatar, Krishna. And to be even more accurate, it's not Krishna but Krishna's son, Pradyumna. Thank you all for the comments on social media and on Spotify's comments section. I'll try and reply to your comments directly there. If you have any thoughts to share about the show, please leave me a comment or a review on the site sfipodcast.com or comment on Spotify. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook. You can listen to the show on all podcast apps as well as YouTube. If you want to send me an email, it's storiesfromindiapodcast@gmail.com. A big thank you to each and every one of you for your continued support and your feedback. The music is from purpleplanet.com. That's purple-planet.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week.